Samantha Power facing a critical test as the new U.S. ambassador to the UN. She is now front and center in contentious talks to create a UN Security Council resolution that would mandate elimination of Syria's chemical weapons arsenal by the middle of next year. So how does she accomplish all of this? Rick Grinnell is a former spokesperson for 4 previous U.S. ambassadors to the UN and a Fox News contributor. Interesting situation in which she finds herself. She has long advocated the use of force against the Syrian leadership in this chemical weapons attack. Now Russia has stepped in and said, you use force or threaten to use force, we're going to veto this resolution.
Yeah, and don't forget that just a couple of weeks ago, she threw up her hands after being on the job about 19 days and said the Security Council cannot come up with a decision and diplomacy is dead. Now she's having to backtrack and try to convince the other 14 members of the Security Council that diplomacy is not dead. So she's got a very tough job. Hopefully she can really buckle down and be a good negotiator. We know she's a very good talker. We know that she delivers incredibly poetic speeches and she writes great books. But that's not the job of the U.S. ambassador. The U.S. ambassador has to sit across the table from Russia and negotiate a resolution. So now she really has to kind of buckle down and be very tough when looking across the table.
You mentioned her speeches and her oratory. I mean, she was essentially a writer and a reporter. She doesn't have a long history of statecraft.
Yes, she really has no negotiation experience whatsoever. So there are people who are very nervous about whether or not she can deliver. Let's be honest. Secretary of State John Kerry and Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, came up with a deal about what to do with Syria. We now have to put that into the form of a resolution. And what needs to happen is Samantha Power needs to make sure that we put into the resolution a very clear penalty if Syria doesn't comply. Certainly we know that there has to be penalties, and so those penalties have to be very clear inside the resolution. The way that this works at the UN is Security Council members get to decide whether they write the resolution under what we call Chapter 6 or Chapter 7 mandates. The Chapter 6 mandate literally says you cannot use force. There are no guns allowed. So we can't really write this under Chapter 6 and be serious.
So what is she to do? I mean, what are her choices? Are you sympathetic to the situation in which she finds herself?
Well, look, I've sat across the table of Russia a million times, and they always say they're against resolutions. Russia would say that they were against all 5 Iran resolutions that we in the Bush administration forced them to a vote. You can't listen to what they're saying. They're very good at the PR game. But I think what you have to do is you have to lay down the resolution. You have to put very tough verbs in that resolution and then force a vote. Call the vote. Make them raise their hand and veto it if they want. They would then get the blame for not having a diplomatic solution to Syria. What we have to be able to do is if we're going to put in writing a serious diplomatic strategy, then there also has to be penalties for not complying with that serious diplomatic strategy.
Well, make a prediction here. I mean, what do you see happening?
I predict that she's not able to convince Russia because she doesn't have negotiation experiences. If she was sent up to Harvard and had to convince a bunch of grad students of what to do, then we have the right person for the job. She'd be very good at that.
All right. Negotiating with the Russians, never an easy task. Rick Grinnell, thank you.